good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Ratchet, episode number 50. Now, I can't think of a better way to spend this half-century episode than to try and get this car fired into life and out of the garage. Now, I've got a whole load of little bits and pieces that I need to get done. I have got a steering wheel refurb. I've got a bespoke gear knob that has been made for me. I've got a whole host of other little gremlins and bits and pieces to try and get to the bottom of to get this thing one step closer to being back on the road. Now, you can follow me on Instagram, Ratchet GT40. Hit the subscribe button below so you don't miss any future episodes that I do release. Up there is the playlist to the other 49 episodes, so you can find out the full goings on of this epic journey that I've been on with this car. So I think that pretty much wraps up everything. Let's get on with the episode. I'd always fancied a wooden steering wheel for the car, just to keep with that real sort of retro vibe that I'm going for. So one evening I jumped on eBay and started looking at Motor steering wheels. I wanted a 13-inch wheel and I stumbled across this one. It said in the description that it had already been refurbished, so I had reasonable hopes that it was going to be in fair shape. Now, when it did arrive, it was clear it wasn't. There were really bad deep gouges all over the steering wheel. So it was clear I was going to have to take it right back to the bare wood, get these scratches out and start afresh. I've put a decent amount of time into the prep of the wood on the steering wheel, where I had to go down quite low to get rid of some of the really deep scratches that were in the wheel. I've then refinished the heads of the aluminium pins just to take those down with the metal file, just so everything is nice and smooth and feels nice to the touch. So the wood is probably 95% ready for staining, but before I take it to that final refinishing stage, I want to get the aluminium sorted out. I want to get this DA'd and Scotch-Brite so it matches obviously all of the other parts in the car. So I'm going to get my little mini DA onto these areas now, clean up the insides of the ring, etc., and try and bring this back to life as well. After a good couple of hours of prep work of this steering wheel, I think I'm getting towards the stage, or I think I am at the stage, where I'm ready to start applying the wood stain. So let me show you how it's all coming together. Here you can basically see how it's all turned out. I've got the aluminium part of the steering wheel prepped and brushed. So that's done and dusted. I managed to take out a lot of the imperfections in the wheel, so I'm pleased about that. And likewise, the majority of the imperfections of the deep gouging in the wood ring is now gone. Paid close attention to the small little circular detailed holes, trying to get those cleaned and polished up, looking nice. And then on the back side, again, it's gone through the exact same processes, getting everything prepped nice and smooth and ready for the wood stain. I'm using a walnut wood stain. It was always my intention to do this because my gear knob that I was having made was out of walnut and I wanted the two to tie together. So the application of this stain was really easy, just giving it about an hour or so to dry in between coats, and I think there may be 5 or 6 coats of the wood stain, then followed by another 3 or 4 coats of a satin clear varnish, just to give it some protection over the top of that. So it's on to the next stage. I had the PCD of my steering wheel and I needed to have an adapter made to get it to the correct PCD to mount to my snap-off steering wheel boss. Now, I've got a friend who does 3D printing and I have CAD facilities. So what I did do was make a very simple 2D CAD drawing that he could then import into his 3D printing software. And after a few days, he posted me this. This is a structurally tested piece. This is the adapter necessary to have my steering wheel mounted to the snap-off boss. So I now have everything I need to get this finally assembled. And keep saying it, but I'm really happy with how this has turned out. The walnut stained steering wheel against my new walnut gear knob. Well, let's get into the details on this. This was bespoke made for me by a company called Built by Basil. They have an Instagram account and also their own website of the same name. They make these really cool gear knobs out of old skateboard decks. But what they also do is make these really nice gear knobs out of hardwoods. So I sent them a message asking them for a teardrop style gear knob as a little nod to the original shape gear knobs fitted the GT40s. But I wanted to add my own little twist, and that was to have this aluminium disc running through the waistline of the gear knob to basically replicate the wooden steering wheel. So when you see both together, it sort of ties it all together nicely. The colour match between the two is pretty good. The grain on the walnut gear knob is absolutely incredible. It is miles above the quality of the wood used on the steering wheel. So there was always going to be a slight little differentiation between the two. But I think just seeing them together, they're still close enough to work really nicely. And then just to finish it off, I got in touch with Motorlita and bought basically the cheapest steering wheel centre that they did. The textured wheel centre also ties in with the backside of my Lucas rearview mirror. So all of the pieces just sort of tie together and they all sort of relate to each other, which I'm really happy about. So the interior now, passenger seat is now in, which I'll touch on in a couple of minutes. I've got harnesses starting to go in. I've got a few little bits and pieces still to do, so I've not put in the driver's seat yet. But the cabin is really starting to take shape and I absolutely love it. So let me show you what's going on with the seats because they have got to a stage where I am fitting them. For those of you that haven't seen the video, I think it was pretty much a whole video on making these seats. Now, I bought a cheap pair of fiberglass seats, which I then chopped around quite a lot, making them low back, changing the profile of the sides and everything like that to make them into a design that I liked and was more fitting with the period that I'm going for with the car. Now, like I say, they're pretty much finished up for the moment. So let me show you them or it in its final form. I've got the edge beading going all the way around the perimeter just to smarten up the edges. I've got my black Willans harnesses fitted and I have fitted some 10mm neoprene foam to the back and to the bottom. Now, I'm sure quite a few of you are thinking, yep, I knew you'd have to fit something for sheer comfort. Now, this isn't for comfort. I tell you why this is, and it's not particularly pleasant if I'm perfectly honest, it is for sweat absorption. Now, I remember driving this car and it being ridiculously hot inside. Now, with the Alcantara seats that were previously fitted, they used to soak up the sweat absolutely perfectly, but sat in some bare fiberglass seats, I'd end up just paddling around in the bottom of the seat and it would be absolutely disgusting. So Something equally as disgusting, I've now fitted this neoprene foam just to basically soak up some of that sweat should it get a little bit too toasty in the car. So that's the reason for it. It's not to do with comfort because in all honesty, there's not much give to this foam. So I hope it does do its job. I hope they are comfy. They look the absolute nuts and I love them. So I think regardless, they're going to stay. But that pretty much takes care of how these look. Something that I've not touched on, which I do need to update you guys on, is the headlight and fog light covers. Now again, there's a video on it, but I made myself some new head and fog light covers out of some fresh perspex because the old ones were badly made, none of the hole spacings were even, etc, etc. You can find the video on my channel where I did go into a heck of a lot of detail about how I made those. But at the time, I left them without the black edging that is very typical on GT40s. It just finishes that sort of perimeter edge where the screws go. Now, once I'd got my side windows fitted that I'd made a long while ago for this car, you can see that I'd added a really nice even 15mm border around the perimeter, you know, in keeping with how it should look in inverted commas. Like I say, at the time, I'd left these just bare perspex. But it dawned on me that it wasn't really tying together. So what I did was remove the covers, mask off from the backside, and then using some Tamiya black plastic spray paint, I then sprayed the same 15mm border around all four of the covers to give me this really nice, more finished look and ties in with everything else on the car. So following the back end of the last video where I said that I'd run the car up to temperature and I was checking for coolant leaks, it did actually throw up that I did have one, and I had a very small drip from the underside of the thermostat housing. So annoyingly, I had to partially drain down the system, remove the thermostat housing, get a new gasket, and then just seal it all back up. And I'm pleased to say that all of the fluids now stay where they should be. And one more point just to wrap up on was the issue that I was having with the oil pressure gauge, and the fact that as soon as I was starting the car, it was absolutely pinning to the max and I didn't really know why. Now, unsurprisingly, it was user error. And after checking the back of the gauge to make sure that all of the connectors were on the correct pins, I then went back round to the sender itself, swapped the wires on the two posts, and what do you know, perfect. Silly error. I thought I'd tried the old switcheroo before. Clearly I hadn't, but that wraps up that one as well. Down at the front end, and again, in the last video, I'd mentioned that I had a pretty soft brake pedal. Now, I was using one of the one-person brake and clutch bleeding kits where there's the little non-return valve on the end of the fluid hose, but I think it just wasn't performing as it should do. So I very kindly roped in my girlfriend to pump the brake pedal, and I carried out a traditional bleed, as it were. And it feels like the pedal is now nice and solid. Now, obviously the proof's in the pudding, but it certainly feels a heck of a lot better than it did. Now, I think that's quite enough of the updates of what's been going on. Pretty much covers everything. I'm now in a good spot. So what I'm going to do, get the garage door open, get this thing out into the daylight.